Hello and welcome to the Doof Book Club, our monthly live stream discussion of a book chosen by you, our listeners. My name is Aureliano Buendia, son of Jose Arcadio Buendia, son of Aureliano Buendia.
And I am Jose Arcadio Buendia, son of Ariano Buendia, son of Jose Arcadio Buendia. That should be
Hello
easy
and
enough
welcome to the
for
Doof
you
Book
guys.
Club,
Ooh,
our monthly live stream discussion of a book chosen by you, our listeners.
I'm
My
having,
name is Aureliano Buendia.
You made noises on my thing. Sorry, everyone. It's a rough start. It was going well, and then it was rough. Hey guys! Not only did we have confusing names that sound like each other, but we stumbled over our words as Matt's voice played again. Welcome to the book club. I hope you guys are having a wonderful Monday night. It is Monday. We don't normally do this thing on Monday. That's why I'm thrown off, Matt. That's why it is. It's only
That's why. It's just so disruptive. It's almost like time is cycling back on itself, and we can't even tell what day of the week it is because everything just returns and loops back over and over itself, no matter what day of the week it is.
Yeah, it's got to be that.
Yep.
I know a lot of you guys are probably been here in the book club before, but if you are joining us for the very first time, welcome. We are Doof Media, and we make podcasts all about the stories we love. We also arrange and organize this monthly book club. Matt, why don't you tell them what that book club thingy is?
Well, each month, Scott and I select 5 books from a pool of books that are submitted to us by our wonderful Doof community. We put up a poll for all of our supporters on Patreon at patreon.com/doofmedia, and we let them vote on which they'd like us to talk about. The book with the most votes wins, and then we all read it.
That's right, or at least that's usually how things go. This month is a bit special because one of our patrons, Torch Salesman, has donated to us at a level sufficient enough that we reward them with the ability to pick a book for us. We let them choose a book, no voting, just say what book you want us to read, and we have to read it. And Torch Salesman decided to do that. So we normally meet every Friday. Again, we're meeting Monday this week because both Matt and I are traveling this weekend to the same place, which is cool.
Yep.
So we meet on the last Friday of every month, and we chat about the book that was chosen. We will pull slides of important or interesting moments and try to really spend a couple hours diving deep into these books. If you are in chat right now, feel free to make comments, ask questions, say hi, say hello, everyone in chat, and so we know who's here. We want this thing to be an interactive discussion. That's the whole deal. So, Matt, what book did Torch Salesman pick for us this
Torch
month?
Salesman picked 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. And the Amazon summary of that book is as follows. 100 Years of Solitude tells the story of the rise and fall, birth and death of the mythical town of Macondo through the history of the Buendia family. Inventive, amusing, magnetic, sad, and alive with unforgettable men and women, brimming with truth, compassion, and a lyrical magic that strikes the soul, this novel is a masterpiece in the art of fiction.
All right, so that is 100 Years of Solitude. So as everyone is getting situated in the chat, and Matt and I are going to talk about our overall thoughts of the book. And as we do this, we want to hear your overall thoughts on this book. Had you read this book before? Is this the first time you read it? What did you think of it? Why do you like it or not like it? And while you guys are doing that, Matt, you do that. What did you think of 100 Years of Solitude?
Yeah, so I found this to be probably the most challenging of any of the books that we've done for the book club.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't really lend itself to a lot of the same tools that I have, developed to talk about stories personally. I was, we were talking about this earlier, the Satanic Verses was another magical realism novel, which is known to be, very, very long and dense and difficult to read. But I actually found that book to have a more traditional way of telling the story and telling things, via characters. Whereas this book, it's doing this complicated thing where it's repeating the character names over and over, not just the names, but the traits. So it's almost like they're being reborn, sort of, and jumping back and forth in time in this way that's, I think, intentionally kind of meant to put you adrift in time. I think that's the effect he's going for.
Yeah.
So it's just much more difficult for me to talk about the same way I talk about books or to think about it the way I think about other books. So all of that said, I enjoyed the experience of it, and it's definitely something where I've just kind of kept mentally going back to it ever since I finished reading it a few days ago. So,
Yeah, yeah.
how about you?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the big things I went into in this book knowing is Nobel Peace Prize, or no, sorry, Nobel Prize of Literature, right?
Yeah.
And that's a big deal. Like it's stamped on my book. That is a big part of the history of this book. And so when you know that going into a book, I think you're kind of, you maybe take the path of, okay, why though? I'm waiting for this book to show me why it won the Nobel Prize. And you start reading this book, and the first parts of it, you're like, what? And so you don't know. And then the book kind of like, I think it kind of captured me. And I struggle with this book too. And I struggled with pulling the slides, and I struggled with planning this talk, and I'm going to struggle my way through the talk, because it is a challenging book. And it's not that it's difficult to read and that it's challenging. Like, it's not that it's like verbose, like with big words that you have to pull a dictionary out. I think the book is fairly easy to read. It is just hard to comprehend. And but the thing that I found myself kind of enraptured by this book, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation because I kind of want to break down why that is. Because, I mean, it was a challenge to get through it at times. It was tough to make myself pick up the book and say, yes, I'm going to spend this hour reading this book now. But usually once I did it, once I said, Scott, the book club's coming up in a week, you really got to get your way through this. Once I opened the book and started reading, I found myself enjoying everything I was reading. It's just that initial getting into it was really difficult for me. But
Yeah, I feel like I might need to read it again, because like up through the halfway point, probably I was like, when does the plot start? And
yeah,
I kind of, even at the time, was like, I think this is just what the book is.
yeah,
I don't think it's going to. I don't like. There's a certain amount of it where you're like, okay, I get it. We're setting up this town. Then you realize, no, we're not setting up the town. The whole story is like, I heard one person describe like the story as having like a handful of characters, and one of the major characters is the town of Macondo.
mm-hmm.
I think that makes sense because it's not the town actually changes as much, if not more so, than any of the individual characters.
Yeah. And I think like there was a moment in near the end of this book for me that I realized I was loving it, when I was like, this book, it's a book that feels important. Like, it just feels like it's important. It feels like you're reading something that is unique and not
Yeah.
like anything else, and is both like doing this huge thing of telling this long history of the peoples of Latin America, while also like just doing weird shit that like is just so weird and confusing but enrapturing at the same time. I mean, I really loved my experience with this book. I really did, and
Yeah.
I'm so excited to get into this with you.
Me too.
So in chat we have Brendan, who is of course Mr. Salesman, Torch Salesman, who recommended the book. Obviously, they say they are and have been a fan. Brendan, I'm curious what your experience was reading this. Like, what drew you to this book the first time? And was it after your first read that you fell in love with it, or did it take some time?
Yeah, and I've always wanted to read this book. In fact, I think it was even on our list last. Or it was on our list at one point, and it didn't get selected, right?
Yeah.
And then Brendan went ahead and made that happen, and I'm glad because I've been wanting to read it for, I don't know. I heard, my mom is very into literature and reads a lot of literature and books, and I remember her telling me about this book sort of in outline, long time ago. So I've always kind of been curious about it. So I'm glad that we got the opportunity to do it.
Yeah, it's on my list of big books to read. Like this, I like the book club, and I like the patrons voting for the book club, but our patrons definitely have a lane for the type of books they like. We do a lot of fantasy and science fiction on this book club, and I'm not complaining about that. I love fantasy, I love sci-fi. They're genres that I really like, but I do like that every so often we get books like this, right? That are just something that I probably never would have read if someone hadn't said, "Hey, read this."
Yeah. Brendan says the first time reading this, the part that really drew them in was when the trail of blood runs its way through the town, up the stairs, etc.
Oh
Yeah.
man, I had pulled that slide and I cut it. So sorry,
Oh.
Brenton. David in chat actually says that they didn't read it. Oh, I'm sorry, David. Well, maybe you'll enjoy the conversation anyway. It'll be really more difficult to follow than a normal book club for a book you haven't read, I think.
Yeah, yeah. I'm wondering what the experience of trying to decipher this indecipherable book through our discussion will be.
Yeah, especially since we're just going to be like hurtling over plot points that are barely plot points. Like we
Right.
obviously don't have time to cover every little plot point in this thing, but
Yeah.
so we're going to be skipping through them at a pretty quick pace. So yeah, good luck, David. I'm glad you're here though. Yeah, and if you ever are curious what the book of the month is, you can check our website. You can check the calendar, doofmedia.com/calendar, and it'll have the book name on the last Friday, and then of course the book club section should have the selection there as well. And if you're in our Patreon Discord, it's pinned to the book club chat there as well. So hopefully you won't miss the next one.
Yeah.
But let's get into it, Matt. Let's talk about this book. And let's start where we have to. Let's start with the family tree.
The family tree, which forks and then reconverges.
Yeah. So the family tree in my book, and you read the audiobook, so this is like I want to get your experience reading this book through audio, because I have my book right here, and the first page of my book, the very first page of the book is a nice little simplified version of the family tree that we're looking on the screen right now. And I basically had my finger on this page throughout the entire book and went back constantly to go, okay, which one is this now? Because as we can see here, these names repeat over and over and over again. And over and over again. Yeah.
Right.
I like this image a lot too, because it's amazing how much personality is captured in these photos right here.
Yeah, that certainly helps a lot. It's funny because I was like trying to match up. The image is too small for me to actually read the name, so I was trying to match them up from their images to my take on their characters. Yeah, so like I kind of just blithely said, I'll figure it out as I go. Which is one of the reasons why I probably need to reread it, because the book spends enough time with Jose Arcadio Buendia and Ursula, the first generation, they're very clear in my head. I immediately get confused about Amaranta and Remedios. They spend a lot of time with Colonel Aureliano Buendia because he's, I don't know, he seems to be one of the more major characters.
He's the closest thing that the book has to a protagonist, I think.
Yeah. It spends a lot of time with him. He has a lot of various adventures and goes through a lot of changes.
Yeah.
And I honestly, it's not like I entirely lose track past that point, but things definitely get pretty fuzzy in the middle for me.
There were some of these characters that I just legitimately couldn't remember, like Ariano Jose, the son of Pilar Tamara and Ariano Buendia. Like, I totally forgot who that guy was.
Yeah,
because I was like, okay, Arcadio's the one he puts in charge of the town that goes crazy and basically becomes a despot and gets killed. But Ariano Jose joins his father in the war and gets killed. I think that was the one guy who did not sit well in my memory. The rest of them were okay.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing I'll say is that I actually remember this cloud of characters in my head. I just don't remember their names. I remember the two sisters who are trying to kill each other. I remember the woman who wants to eat the dirt and eat the siding from the house.
Mm-hmm.
I remember the beautiful one that floats up into heaven because she's too beautiful. All of these things stuck with me. Actually, it's not like the book just went through my head like a sieve. It actually stuck with me. I just don't remember their names.
Yeah.
So, which again is one of those things where I'm like, I have to assume that that's semi-intentional because they're all named the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, is like people say like this book is confusing. I can't tell these characters apart. And my response to that is exactly that. That's the point. Like, the point is you're supposed to confuse the characters. The point is that this whole thing is cyclical. That that everything that happens is going to happen, was going to happen, will happen again. Like, and down the line, the ripples of choices made from 7 generations removed just repeats and circles, and I love it for that. I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
Brendan is talking about the magical realism, which is something we're going to probably spend most of this conversation talking about, because this is like the book, the example book for magical realism, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which,
Yeah.
I mean, conceptually is a pretty simple like idea, right? It's just like, it's just not fantasy. It's just, it's in our world, but it's fantasy.
Yeah, I read this
Your
interesting.
tweet was great, by the way.
Well, I read this interesting thing where people were basically saying um, the idea of magical realism is something, and I'm going to butcher this because I don't think I fully understood it, and I don't know if this is like gospel or this is just this person's take, but it was like the point of magical realism is to approach um, reality, approach uncomfortable realities that it's difficult to talk about in kind of an oblique way using this fantastical and impossible lens so that you can actually depict something like a horrifying massacre in a way where you're kind of almost ambushing the reader with it in a way where they're not like if that book were not written in a magical realism, I mean, sorry, if that scene were not written in a magical realism context, your brain like would automatically process it differently than it does when it's in this book.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Like I thought that was an interesting perspective anyway.
Yeah, but I think it's both, because at the same time it allows you to do dark things like this book does, but
Yeah.
it is firmly anchored in reality at the same
Right.
time. So it's like semi escapism, right? Like you can
Yeah.
kind of hide behind the fantastical elements of the story, but not to the extent where you can't sit here and look at the massacre of 3,000 working men who just wanted like more food and
Yeah.
be like, oh, well, that's just like in this mystical world, and you can't it's not fully that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's this other confusing aspect of things, which is that I heard that the author was like basically someone was asking like, so what is the meaning of um, the insomnia plague? And he was like, well, I remember that happening when I was a child. And you're like, wait a second. No, clearly that was a metaphorical thing that you inserted to have some metaphorical meaning. And he's like, no, that happened. So I'm like, oh, all right. I'm confused now, but all right.
Yeah, I mean, I think also that's just authors, taking the piss, right? Like,
Yeah,
I mean,
maybe.
if I were an author, I would do that all the time. But I mean, I think like as we get into the chapter or the slides here, I think one of the things we'll see is one of the things I absolutely read about his approach to this book, which he was trying to set it up from the perspective of like your grandma's telling you a story, right? And that's
Yeah.
kind of how his language is, how he talks about the book, how the story kind of jumps around. Like it is very much out of place in time, literally, but the story also like will just tell the entire life history of this one guy and then move on to something else, and then suddenly you're back in that one guy's like 50 years prior, and you're like, wait.
Right. Well, it's
and
like
that,
a parenthetical that lasts 80 pages, right? Yeah.
Right. And that to me is very much like the your grandma telling you a story type of rambling thing where she'll just oh yeah, about this, and she'll just go off on this little tangent and do this whole thing and then slowly weave her way back to the. So when I heard like he constructed it like that, I was like, yeah, I see that now. I got that. Yeah. Toby is here. Hey Toby, how's it going? I guess before we start reading these slides, Matt, one of the things we should do is, this translation, I think, is incredible. There was no moment in reading this book that it felt like a translated book to me. Like maybe one or two word usage where I was like, I don't know if that would have been the word that, like, if this was originally in English, they would have used there. But that, few and far between. Like, I think this is a beautiful, poetic book. And the fact that this wasn't the language it was written in, I think, is a testament to the work of the translator.
Yeah, and I also speak positively for the audiobook, that the guy just has this mellifluous voice that's so pleasant to listen to, and it just, yeah, I mean, I in fact, I think that I forgot that it was a translated book until a certain point when I was reading about it and was like, oh yeah, right, and then I, reapproached it that way. But yeah, it's just really, really excellent translation. I agree.
Yeah. All right, so let's start with the start of the book. 20 minutes into the podcast, we're doing great. Many years later, as he faced the firing squad, Colonel Ariano Buendia was to remember that distant afternoon when his father took him to discover ice. At that time, Macondo was a village of 20 adobe houses, built on the bank of a river of clear water that ran along a bed of polished stones, which were white and enormous like prehistoric eggs. The world was so recent that many things lacked names, and in order to indicate them, it was necessary to point. Every year during the month of March, a family of ragged gypsies would set up their tents near the village, and with a great uproar of pipes and kettle drums, they would display new inventions. First, they brought the magnet. A heavy gypsy with an untamed beard and sparrow hands, who introduced himself as Melquiades, put on a bold public demonstration of what he himself called the eighth wonder of the learned alchemist of Macedonia. He went from house to house, dragging 2 metal ingots, and everyone was amazed to see pots, pans, tongs, and braziers tumbling down from the places, and beams creaking from the desperation of nails and screws trying to emerge. And even objects that had been lost for a long time appeared from where they had been searched for most, and went dragging along in turbulent confusion behind Melquiades' magic irons. "Things have a life of their own," the gypsy proclaimed with a harsh accent. "It's simply a matter of waking up their souls." Jose Arcadio Buendia, whose unbridled imagination always went beyond the genius of nature, and even beyond miracles and magic, thought it would be possible to make use of that useless invention to extract gold from the bowels of the earth. Melquiades, who was an honest man, warned him, "It won't work for that." But Jose Arcadio Buendia, at the time, did not believe in the honesty of gypsies, so he traded his mule and a pair of goats for 2 magnetized ingots. So I love this opening. I love this opening does so many things, right? Like we were talking about how the story wanders, and that's exactly what this opening does. Like the opening line of this is a famous opening line. Like it's printed on the back of my book right here. The many years as he faced the firing squad, Colonel Ariano Buendia was to remember that distant afternoon when his father took him to discover ice. And then that's that sentence. And then we don't
done with that.
We don't get to that moment till like 50 pages into the book.
Yeah.
But and we jump back basically to prehistory almost. Like like we're going to talk of as Macondo as like basically this symbol for the entirety of Latin American history, right? Is this town and the rise and fall of this town and the people that live in it. And we set that up really early here, right? With this idea of the world was so recent then that things didn't even have names yet. That this is a small village. I love the emphasis on the clearness of the water, the white and enormous stones in it. Like this is new, it's clean. It's like this is a town that for I think the first almost 50 years of its existence, nobody dies. Like they don't even have a cemetery because nobody's dying. Yeah. And I love this opening.
Yeah. Speaking of that first sentence, like you immediately, at least my brain, the way I'm trained to read stories, I was like, oh yeah, okay, so this Colonel this is going to be rough. Aureliano Buendia is going to end up in front of the firing squad. He's going to be executed. So this is like his recollections of his life.
This is like his biopic. Like I have to consider my entire life right before the moment of my death thing.
Yeah. Nope. Because that doesn't happen.
He actually survives this.
Yep.
Yeah. And the book, like it doesn't, like the book doesn't do reveals, right? Like you could say this is like a setup for a reveal later, but then like later in the book, it's just casually like, yeah, and eventually he gave up on war and just like lived out the rest of his days making little golden fishes. And then we don't get that the execution of that story for hundreds of pages. It's not interested, like you were saying, this is not a typical narrative structure in any kind of way. It is not interested in the typical setup, payoff, drama of storytelling.
Well, it'll do things like spoil the fact that Colonel Aureliano Buendia has 12 sons and that they're all killed before he dies. Yeah. Like as it's like practically as it's introducing his character.
17, Matt.
17 sons, yeah. Yeah, like it's funny because like it spoils everything about his character as it's introducing him.
Yeah.
And it does that kind of thing frequently.
Yeah, with every single character. And I mean, it'll repeat itself. Like, I mean, intentionally, this book is cyclical in which almost every one of our Buendia characters almost comes to the exact same revelation near the end of their life where they're like, oh man, I shouldn't have lived like this. Drag.
Yeah, right.
And like that happens over and over and over again.
And maybe this is just me, but like they all kind of suck and I hate them. and like it's hard for me to. I mean, I'm sort of being tongue in cheek there, but like the book is not trying to make you fond of these characters. Like these aren't characters you're meant to like vicariously connect to and want to be pals with. It's more like these are sort of like vessels of common human foibles
Yeah.
and you probably do relate to it. It's just
Sure.
it's just the ways in which you relate to it is always like, yeah, I
Yeah.
relate to that.
Right. I mean, like half these characters are like in love with their aunts slash sisters slash mothers. Like,
Uh-huh.
I mean, like the other half are like bitter and angry. Brendan says in chat, Ursula's a saint. The rest are pretty awful, though. I mean, yeah, Ursula's all right. God, she lives for a long time.
Yeah, I think Ursula's sin was not giving up sooner.
Yeah. yeah. I mean, she didn't do anything as bad as like locking her daughter in a seminary or a convent for the rest of her life, presumably. We never actually get to find out what happens to Mimi, but nothing. Actually, it does. It says she kills herself, right? We just never actually see that, I think. I
don't remember. Just one. I don't know if you have any particular slides about the house, but apparently someone did like a basically a map showing how the house grows and shrinks over the course of the book. Like it literally grows and then shrinks again. The house itself.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway.
Well, and I mean, I know in times they specifically like enlarge it. Like there's like actual moments of like them saying like, yes, construction companies came and built these new parts. But yeah, there's also moments when it's just like, we let everything go except for these 2 rooms and everything else was like returned to the earth.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, this is the magical realism, right? And again, we established this very early on here with this, like, it's a magnet, right? We know magnets, we know how magnets work, but it's not a magnet that exists in any real life.
Yeah.
Like, it's way too powerful. Like, it's just not, like, you're not going to be almost pulling nails out of wood.
Right. I mean, and I don't know if this is correct, but my like interpretation of that was like, if you are an adult before you ever see a magnet, then it is sort of as stupendous as something where you like walk around a building and you hear the house groan in response to it, right? Like,
yeah,
if you have no familiarity with like magical action at a distance and you see this thing, it's going to have that kind of effect on you.
Yeah.
So it's almost like he's telling. It reminds me of like impressionistic painting or whatever, where it's more about the impact it's having on you than about like what is actually being done with the paint on the canvas.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of it is designed for the impact that it has rather than like, you know what? No, really, there's the magnet's that strong. Like it doesn't like the magnet's not a plot point. They didn't use the magnet later, right? It's literally just to wash over you.
Right, and I love that Jose Arcadio, like as a great character defining trait, he sees this thing that everyone else is like wowed with, and he's wowed with it just along with the rest of them. But his like fascination with this thing is not the same. It's not like, wow, look at this magic. It's like, all right, how can I use this shit?
Yeah.
What can I do with this shit? How do I use this to my advantage? How do I make use of a useless invention? I love that. I love that turn of phrase there. And even to the point where like I love that like this like, you know, gypsies have a very negative connotation, right? Like there's like a lot of intrinsic racism behind that term, as like these untrustworthy, sneaky people. But Melquiades is this guy who is an honest man. Like he just like straight up is like, no, you can't. I'll sell it to you, but just so you know, you can't use it for what you're thinking. He's like, no, I got this. And this is again repeated over and over again. Just through Jose Arcadio, but through the rest of them as well.
Yeah. Toby says the metaphor runs many layers deep, even when it's not leading to anything particularly. I think that's actually a perfect thing to say about it, because you're like, because and often I can give like a first pass guess at what something means, but then in the same breath be like, but that doesn't really mean anything, so I don't know.
Yeah. But I don't think Gabriel Garcia Marquez like necessarily wants it to, you know, and it's like this is one of those things where I'm like, if the metaphor doesn't go anywhere, is that bad writing? And I would be like, well, no, not in this case, because like the whole point is like this otherworldly like nonsense where you're like things definitely mean things, but not everything means things.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Let's move on.
Mm-hmm.
This is the founding of Macondo. Basically, this town itself is one of our characters. Jose Arcadio Buendia was completely ignorant of the geography of the region. He knew that to the east there lay an impenetrable mountain chain, and that on the other side of the mountains there was an ancient city of Riohacha, where in times past, according to what he'd been told by the first Ariano Buendia, his grandfather, Sir Francis Drake had gone crocodile hunting with cannons, and that he repaired them and stuffed them with straw to bring to Queen Elizabeth. In his youth, Jose Arcadio Buendia and his men, with wives and children, animals, and all kinds of domestic implements, had crossed the mountains in search of an outlet to the sea, and after 26 months they gave up the expedition and founded Macondo, so they would not have to go back. It was, therefore, a route that did not interest him, for it could only lead to the past. To the south lay the swamps, covered with an eternal vegetable scum, and the whole vast universe of the great swamp, which, according to what the gypsies said, had no limits. The great swamp in the west mingled with a boundless extension of water where there were soft-skinned cetaceans that had the head and torso of a woman, causing the ruination of sailors, and the charm of their extraordinary breasts. No, with the charm of their extraordinary breasts. The gypsies sailed along that route for 6 months before they reached the strip of land over which the mules that carried the mail passed. According to Jose Arcadio Buendia's calculations, the only possibility of contact with civilization lay along the northern route. So he handed out clearing tools and hunting weapons to the same men who had been with him during the founding of Macondo. He threw his directional instruments and maps into a knapsack, and he undertook the reckless adventure.
So I like this a lot. First, we should say Ted has joined us in the chat. So hello, Ted. Hope you're doing well. So Macondo is kind of founded on I give up,
Yeah.
right? On exhaustion, right? It's this town, this place that's founded on a failed attempt to explore something new. And I love that. I love the idea of this town is just like, we don't want to go back. And it's like it's a very future looking type thing, right? Like he even says here, I don't care about that route because that way only leads to the past. I'm not interested in the past. I'm interested in the future. But of course, we know from the story that the past is the future is the past. Time is a flat circle. Everything repeats itself, and you can't escape it no matter what you do. Hooray!
Yep. Yeah. I like this idea of. This is one of the more, to my mind, more overt analogies to real life, where if it's meant to be a metaphor for Latin America, then it's this group of people who set out with like a bold and ambitious plan to find something in particular. They don't find the thing that they set out to find, so they just kind of stop, and then that's where their world is now. Yeah, that's where we live now. There's an endless swamp to one side. There's mermaids over there. There's an impassable mountain chain, and nobody will find us or communicate with us for decades, except for these wandering gypsies.
Yeah, which of course we find out is actually not true. I love how Macondo just like becomes absolutely invariably connected with the outside world, right? Like this idea of this solitary place in the middle of nowhere, surrounded on all sides. Like this expedition that he's about to go on, and this thing fails, and he finds himself, and he says, "Oh, we're surrounded by water on all sides," and it turns out that's just wrong. But he just he draws all these maps based on his incorrect assumption, and then everyone in town just like assumes that that's the real map, which is like a thing that probably happened all the time for real, right? Like back before maps didn't exist, someone draws a map and then says, "This is the map of the area," and you're just like, okay, I believe you, I guess.
Yeah, right. We're talking about eating crocodile meat in the chat. I've enjoyed it. Yeah, I like fried crocodiles.
Yeah. I had it in New Orleans, I think.
Maybe it was alligator, actually.
Yeah, I can't.
Anyway.
I think I had both, actually.
I think it was alligator that I had, but anyway.
But we have more magical realism here, right? With the mermaids that are just like thrown in here casually.
Yeah.
The story of Riohacha, which is from where Ursula's from, right? I think so.
I don't remember.
Yeah, I
I don't
think that's
remember.
where she's from.
So little things like Sir Francis Drake and Queen Elizabeth being thrown in here, it strikes me as a kind of a mention of like the simultaneous, like maybe even the fact that like the English were here first, and now we're trying to find what they found, but we can't. I don't know. Just riffing on that.
Yeah, well, and this book does a lot of placing Macondo in the world, but loosely. Like we know we were told specifically about the plantation company is from the U.S. They Jose Arcadio is sent to Rome to train to be the Pope. What's her name is in Brussels. Amaranta Ursula goes to Brussels to school. Like, so we get these places in the world, in the real world, right? But Macondo and the country that surrounds it is always kind of nebulous. Like, I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be Colombia, but I don't think the book ever says Colombia.
Yeah, I don't think it ever says Colombia. I mean, it was so. Again, I'm not sure if there's a slide on this exactly, but when they start talking about like the liberal and conservative parties, that completely threw me for a loop, because I'm like, oh, this is a world that has parties. like it seemed so. That seemed like such an anachronistic idea to throw into the story as it was at that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Like it seemed like you're reading like about John Smith, and then suddenly they're talking about liberals and conservatives. You're like, wait,
Right.
where are we? And then furthermore, just the fact that like no one could actually articulate or bothered to articulate any kind of like reason why they would be a liberal or a conservative. It was more like their family was a conservative family, and thus that's why they were conservative. Like it all seemed very incidental.
Yeah, I mean, there's very few moments in which the actual politics show amongst the civil wars that are going on, right? I mean, there is specific to the workers of the plantation. There is definitely, like, I'm pretty sure Gabriel Garcia Marquez was a socialist, and I think the rights of workers, his politics around that show in that section. But I do agree that intentionally the liberal conservative fighting was meant to just kind of be like, what is this? I mean, like the best leader of the town while they're off away fighting wars was a conservative general, right? I mean, the book makes it very clear, and he's executed anyway. So I think we're supposed to see and we do have some slides on that. We're supposed to see the kind of uselessness of that conflict.
Yeah, and Colonel Aureliano Buendia was like explicitly not politically motivated. He was just bored.
Yeah,
more or less.
Yep. All right, so this next slide is about Ursula and Jose Arcadio Buendia's relationship. They were cousins. They had grown up together in the old village that both of their ancestors, with their work and their good habits, had transformed into one of the finest towns in the province. Although their marriage was predicted from the time they had come into the world, when they expressed their desire to be married, their relatives tried to stop it. They were afraid that those two healthy products of two races that had interbred over centuries would suffer the shame of breeding iguanas. There had already been a horrible precedent. An aunt of Ursula's, married to an uncle of Jose Arcadio Buendia's, had a son who went through life wearing loose, baggy trousers and who bled to death after having lived 42 years in the purest state of virginity. For he had been born and had grown up with a cartilaginous tail in the shape of a corkscrew, and with a small tuft of hair on the tip. A pig's tail that was never allowed to be seen by any woman, and that cost him his life when a butcher friend did him the favor of chopping it off with a cleaver. Jose Arcadio Buendia, with the whimsy of his 19 years, resolved the problem with the single phrase, "I don't care if I have piglets, as long as they can talk." So they were married amidst a festival of fireworks and a brass band that went on for 3 days. So, I mean, I pulled this slide because this is like the book ends where it begins, right? With these two people coming together in this incestuous relationship that they're worried is going to produce a deformed child. Of course, the book ends with that exact thing happening. I like how even after they were married, they like resisted consummating that marriage for a long time because of that fear, but Jose Arcadio was insulted once and he couldn't let that stand. So
he killed a man.
Yeah. He killed a man and then had sex with his wife. That's how that goes. And he's haunted by that decision for the rest of his life. And by haunted,
Literally.
I mean literally haunted.
Yeah, there's a ghost
Yeah.
that is frequently in the story,
Yep.
and yeah, this is the whole incest thing is one thing where I just don't know what to make of it
Yeah.
because I'm like, okay, so is the author condemning this personally and saying that this is bad behavior and the reason that they're cursed is because of the incest, or is it more like one of the many things that that this family is cursed with is these incestuous tendencies where they're always in love with with their own family members? I'm leaning more toward the latter just because it crops up over and over, and it seems just like it's just part of their makeup is to basically be doomed to have unacceptable desires, and it's not even their fault.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of where I go with it as well. I do think it is something I had a hard time really grasping onto because you don't want to jump to conclusions, right? You don't want to be like, look at like if Macondo and the Buendias are a metaphor for the struggle and plight of Latin America, then you're like, okay, but what about the incest though? What are you trying to say about Latin America, Marquez? And I mean that's why I was like, okay, Scott, back up. I think you're right though. I think this is about solitude. This is about how at the end of the day we're alone, and I think part of that that loneliness is like forbidden love, right? Like these people are cursed with solitude and the misfortune that comes with that solitude, and part of that is the people you love you can't.
Yeah, right. That was one thing about the book that I was surprised at was the fact that it just uses the word solitude like 1,000 times.
Uh-huh.
It's not at all being subtle with this theme of like, yep, every single one of these characters, even if they're surrounded by people, they are filled with this immense, unconquerable solitude that's just absolutely miserable.
Yeah.
And like no one in the family, regardless of their life circumstances, is really exempt from it.
Yeah. The book is saying that it was chopping off his pigtail that resulted in his death. Yes.
Yeah, because it says he bled to death after the butcher cut it off. So yeah, like basically removing the tail is a death sentence. So
I like
yeah.
I like the line though. He went through life wearing loose, baggy trousers. Ugh. That's as bad as the virginity and the pigtail.
Right. It's Latin America.
Yeah, I mean, I get like that's a very specific like stylistic thing, right? It's like your clothes don't fit right.
Yeah, right. Okay. Shall we move on?
Brendan says this is about solitude is the hottest take on this book. Yeah, did you not know that? It's about like if I had to guess, I would say about 100 years of it.
Yeah, roughly. For the family. Yeah. Okay, next slide. Jose Arcadio Buendia, on the verge of madness, sees the ghost of Prudencio Aguilar. I'm not even going to...
Aguilar.
Okay. The fever of insomnia fatigued him so much that one dawn he could not recognize the old man with white hair and uncertain gestures who came to his bedroom. It was Prudencio Aguilar. When he finally identified him, startled that the dead also aged, Jose Arcadio Buendia felt himself shaken by nostalgia. "Prudencio," he exclaimed, "you've come from a long way off." After many years of death, the yearning for living was so intense, the need for company so pressing, so terrifying the nearness of that other death which exists within death, that Prudencio Aguilar had ended up loving his worst enemy. He had spent a great deal of time looking for him. He asked the dead from Riocha about him, the dead who came from Upar Valley, those who came from the swamp, and no one could tell him because Macondo was a town that was unknown to the dead until Melquiades arrived and marked it with a small black dot on the motley maps of death. Jose Arcadio Buendia conversed with Prudencio Aguilar until dawn. A few hours later, worn out by the vigil, he went to Aureliano's workshop and asked him, "What day is today?" Aureliano told him that it was Tuesday. "I was thinking the same thing," Jose Arcadio Buendia said, "but suddenly I realized that it's still Monday, like yesterday. Look at the sky, look at the walls, look at the begonias. Today is Monday, too." Used to his manias, Aureliano paid no attention to him. On the next day, Wednesday, Jose Arcadio Buendia went back to the workshop. This is a disaster, he said. Look at the air. Listen to the buzzing of the sun. The same as yesterday and the day before. Today is Monday, too. That night, Pietro Crespi found him on the porch, weeping for Prudencio Aguilar, for Melquiades, for Rebecca's parents, for his mother and father, and for those he could remember who were now alone in death.
I love the scene. I love the scene so much. We get the ghost of Prudencio Aguilar here, so like that's our first ghost in the story, and it's not the last ghost, but it is a big ghost that follows the story throughout all of it. Melquiades' ghost will also be there, right?
Yeah, right. And his is like, it's interesting because yes, they're ghosts, but the story is actually ambiguous as to like what the nature of death actually is.
Yeah.
Like this is not a, like they're not spiritual. They're not like, they don't have ectoplasm, right? Like you get the sense like if this was a movie that they would just be there. Like I couldn't stand being dead anymore, so here I am. And I like this is even the idea that he ages. He has white hair now.
Yeah.
Even though he died when he was younger.
I love the death, the nearness of that other death which exists within death.
Right.
Like that there is something beyond death.
Double death.
Double death. I mean, and like this, and that is, I mean, this idea, like again, getting back to loneliness, solitude, that like death is, you are alone. Like Prudencio Aguilar is looking around, looking for people. He's so desperate to be around people that now he's fallen in love with his worst enemy, just because he's so desperate for connection, for an escape from that solitude, from that doom. And instead, what he does is he passes on this. Like I think this is like a way of the book kind of declaring its theme of circularism to the first and oldest character, because like this idea that today is Monday, tomorrow is Monday, the day after that is Monday, everything's the same. Look at the air, listen to the buzzing of the sun, the same as yesterday and the day before. I love that. I love this. I mean, like, and this is a realization that he has, and it drives him crazy. And that every one of the characters will have some sort of realization connected to their solitude that relates to like the truth of existence.
Yeah. Brendan says, I'm so enamored by the idea of a town so isolated that it's unknown to death until Melquiades informs death where it is.
Yeah.
I love that.
I love that too. Marked it with a small black dot on the motley maps of death. I love this. I love the language of this book. It's so lyrical.
Yeah. From the first slide, I forgot to mention like the description of Melquiades having sparrow hands, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, what does that even mean? But also
I kind of got
perfect.
you.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
There is like one thing that you will have noticed by now is that our slides are really just long paragraphs. Like the paragraphs in the story are very, very long. You don't have a lot of paragraph breaks. In fact, there's a slide, and I was going to try to pull it, but I couldn't. But where Fernanda is lecturing her husband, and it literally goes on. It's one sentence that goes on for 3 pages.
I love that. That's my favorite.
I thought about pulling it, but I was like, how's this going to work? How do I sell the amazingness of the sentence where I can't pull the whole thing? But yeah, so I thought we'd just talk about it.
Yeah, the audiobook reader did great on that too. And then he just starts smashing everything. Which, I mean, like, it's kind of horrible, but I couldn't help but laugh at the whole dynamic of what was going on there. Because, like, she's basically right, actually.
Yeah, she's absolutely right. But she's also, like, kind of terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, all these characters are fucked up.
Yeah. Well, they're all wronged by the world, but then they react to that in like the worst possible way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. David is kind of just wondering aloud if this book had a small influence on Coco. I think that's kind of like I don't know if that's chicken egg because like the depiction of death in Coco is very much connected to Mexican cultural beliefs around death, which I think feed into the story absolutely, right? Because of who our author is,
right? Yeah. So I think he's just expressing the kind of ideas about death that he was raised with.
Yeah, but I also think this book is such a cultural milestone amongst Latin Americans that I would be very surprised if like nobody during the course of writing Coco thought about this book at all. Like I find that very hard to believe.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
so I would say the answer to that is yeah, probably.
Before I forget, random note from one of my preparation materials is that apparently the author had a very large number of siblings, and two of them were named like Gabriella. So like they literally repeated the name within the same generation. So you see where this kind of thing comes from.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So we're moving forward in time now, and Aureliano has decided he's going to go to war. On Sunday, 2 weeks after the occupation, Aureliano entered Geronaldo Marquez's house, and with his usual terseness asked for a mug of coffee without sugar. When the two of them were alone in the kitchen, Aureliano gave his voice an authority that had never been heard before. "Get the boys ready," he said. "We're going to war." Geronaldo Marquez did not believe him. "With what weapons?" he asked. "With theirs," Aureliano replied. Tuesday, at midnight, in a mad operation, 21 men under the age of 30, commanded by Ariano Buendia, armed with table knives and sharpened tools, took the garrison by surprise, seized the weapons, and in the courtyard executed the captain and the 4 soldiers who had killed the woman. That same night, while the sound of the firing squad could be heard, Arcadio was named civil and military leader of the town. The married rebels barely had time to take leave of their wives, whom they left to their own devices. They left at dawn, cheered by the people who had been liberated from the terror, to join the forces of the revolutionary general Victorio Medina, who, according to the latest reports, was on his way to Manaur. Before leaving, Aureliano brought Don Apolinar Moscote out of a closet. "Rest easy, father-in-law," he told him. "The new government guarantees on its word of honor your personal safety and that of your family." Don Apolinar Moscote had trouble identifying the conspirator in high boots and with a rifle slung over his shoulder with the person he had played dominoes with until 9 in the evening. "This is madness, Aurelito," he exclaimed. "Not madness," Aureliano said. "War. And don't call me Aurelito anymore. Now I'm Colonel Ariano Buendia." So this is our character's transformation, which, as you said, happens because he just kind of got bored.
Yeah, it's not political. I mean, I guess you could say that he's motivated by the fact that these soldiers came along, but it's not.
Yeah.
He doesn't have any real principled reason for preferring the side that he takes.
Yeah, I mean, like he's kind of just talking with his father-in-law, who is a staunch conservative, and is like, "Actually, no, I'm a liberal." And he just says it. And yes, the motivation for this moment to pick up arms in this moment is, yes, soldiers come into town. They killed people. They killed a woman for no reason at all. And that is like the primary motivation for the uprising to happen now. But yeah, the political implications behind it are it's mostly just, I'm mad at the way things are going.
Yeah.
And that's it. And that's a lot what a lot of revolutions are, right? It's just like, It's a group of people that are very upset with the way things are going and they want to change it and they are going to fight to do so.
Yeah. And I think like it's a character trait of the Aurelianos in general is being like brash and violent and deeply dissatisfied and then prone to like lash out through that dissatisfaction.
Yeah. Yeah.
So basically it has a lot more to do with that than any actual circumstance. So
yeah.
It's I mean, I think this book, one thing that I will say that I think it's doing is it's saying that there are like types of person, and you are kind of the type of person that you are, and that these types of people pass down through generations, and maybe or maybe it's saying something about like the types of people that you'll find in a given society.
Yeah. Well, and it does have something very interesting to say about change, too.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, when we get to the Segundo twins, right, they start off looking just like each other. Then as they age, they change. They get to a point where everyone's like, how did we ever confuse these two people for each other? But by the time of their deaths, which happen instantaneously, which happen at the same time, they basically have returned to looking exactly like each other again, so much to the point where, when buried, their coffins get confused and they're buried in the wrong coffin. And these are two people that they always suspected were actually switched at birth or faked being each other for so long that they just forgot which one was which, which is, I mean, fascinating in its own right. But I mean, I love that idea that like, I think it is making an argument about change and about maybe that this kind of idea that you kind of are what you are, and you will go off and do things. Like I think one of the things is Aureliano is a very reserved type of person. The Aurelianos are. They are the ones that usually spend the most amount of time locked in the workshop tinkering with something or doing something, right? And Colonel Aureliano like takes up arms and he goes off and does all this stuff, but as we'll see in the next slide, he kind of just gets exhausted by that whole thing, just gives it up and retreats back into his solitude of the workshop and spends the rest of his days doing that.
Yeah. Cool.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about his deciding to get out of the war.
Okay. So yeah, in this next slide, he gets tired of the war. During that interminable night, while Colonel Geroneldo Marquez thought about his dead afternoons in Amaranta's sewing room, Colonel Aureliano Buendia scratched for many hours trying to break the hard shell of his solitude. His only happy moments since that remote afternoon when his father had taken him to see ice had taken place in his silver workshop, where he passed the time putting little gold fishes together. He had had to start 32 wars, and he had had to violate all of his pacts with death and wallow like a hog in the dung heap of glory in order to discover the privileges of simplicity almost 40 years late. At dawn, worn out by the tormented vigil, he appeared in the cell an hour before the execution. "The farce is over, old friend," he said to Colonel Geroneldo Marquez. "Let's get out of here before the mosquitoes in here execute you." Colonel Geroneldo Marquez could not repress the disdain that was inspired in him by that attitude. "No, Aureliano," he replied. "I'd rather be dead than see you changed into a bloody tyrant." "You won't see me," Colonel Aureliano Buendia said. "Put on your shoes and help me get this shitty war over." When he said it, he did not know that it was easier to start a war than to end one. It took him almost a year of fierce and bloody effort to force the government to propose conditions of peace favorable to the rebels, and another year to convince his own partisans of the convenience of accepting them.
Yeah, so this is the end of his campaign. He started 32 wars. He lost them all. His story is really tragic, right? Like,
yeah.
He eventually gets a street named after him, and he doesn't care. And then by the end of the book, nobody even remembers. Like, wasn't that street named after that one guy?
Right. Yeah,
like,
people named each other after streets back then.
Yeah, right, exactly. It's really sad, and in this moment, like one of his oldest friends and trusted war mates is basically going to be executed because Aureliano just wants to like capitulate to the government and be like, yeah, fine, I'll sign whatever. And he sees that as a betrayal, and then has said, okay, I'm going to execute you. And Ursula talks him out of it. Good old Ursula. But yeah, I mean, this is like this moment of his only happy moment since that remote afternoon had taken place in his silver workshop. He had violated all the pacts with death and wallow like a hog in the dung heap of glory in order to discover the privileges of simplicity almost 40 years late. So again, this moment where our characters too late realize the bad choices in their life. And I think that's you know, a lot of this book is allegory, but that's not specifically allegorical to any one thing. I think that's just the human experience, right? That's something we do where it's always after the fact that we realize, oh, the thing I was chasing after isn't the thing that made me happy.
Yeah. That's perfect. I mean, that's a great sentence. That's a great turn of phrase. Wallow like a hog in the dung heap of glory. Because, I mean, it's relatable. Like, even if you haven't been a great war leader, you're like, you go after the thing you think you want, and it's more like wallowing in a dung heap of that than it is actually what you thought it would be.
Yeah.
Almost always.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, it kind of destroys him. Like the experience of the war leaves him a shell of a person. So he's back resolved doing the thing that always made him happy, but he doesn't even find joy in it. It's just like a thing he does now. He just sits in that house, sits in that silver workshop, making the gold fishes, dies, is forgotten, and none of it mattered.
Right.
All right. Let's move on to the next slide.
Okay.
Let's talk about Ariano Segundo and his twin brother. And let's look family tree time. Their dad was Arcadio, who was the crazy despot one who was left in charge of the town and was a terrible ruler. right?
I think so.
with Santa Sofia de la Piedad, who is just like a ghost in this book, who is like, you forget about her until the book reminds you she's there.
Right.
So yeah, Aureliano marries Fernanda, but also keeps up a relationship with this mistress, Petra Cotes, who has magical powers when you bang her.
Right. Yeah. She keeps everything growing and fertile. It's important that he do this.
Mm-hmm. Which is like that's a great fucking excuse, you know? Like, I mean, like, sometimes you step back from the magical realism and you're just like, okay, like, if I was trying to sell someone on something, wouldn't I just be like, no, you don't understand. I have to, because then the cows will have triplets.
It's a good luck charm. Yeah.
It was during that time that it occurred to Petrocotis to raffle off rabbits. They reproduced and grew up so fast that there was barely time to sell the tickets for the raffle. At first, Aureliano II did not notice the alarming proportions of the proliferation. But one night, when nobody in town wanted to hear about the rabbit raffles anymore, he heard a noise by the courtyard door. "Don't get worried," Petrocotis says. "It's only the rabbits." They could not sleep, tormented by the uproar of the animals. At dawn, Aureliano II opened the door and saw the courtyard paved with rabbits, blue in the glow of the dawn. Petrocotis, dying with laughter, could not resist the temptation of teasing him. "Those are the ones who were born last night," she said. "Oh my God," he said, "why don't you raffle off cows?" A few days later, in an attempt to clean out her courtyard, Petrocotis exchanged the rabbits for a cow, who 2 months later gave birth to triplets. That was how things began. Overnight, Aureliano II became the owner of land and livestock, and he barely had time to enlarge his overflowing barns and pig pens. It was a delirious prosperity that even made him laugh, and he could not help doing crazy things to release his good humor. "Cease, cows! Life is short," he would shout. Ursula wondered what entanglements he had got into, whether he might be stealing, whether he'd become a rustler, and every time she saw him uncorking champagne just for the pleasure of pouring the foam over his head, she would shout at him and scold him for the waste. So, I think one thing that Brendan has said is that, yeah, that what we talked about earlier, that names in the story tend to carry certain personality traits, and the twins exhibit the opposite traits as the ones they should. Aureliano II is kind of acting like a Jose Arcadio here, and vice versa. And that is very true. I like this so much because, like, this is one of those, like, he gets so swept up into this crazy life, and like it's destroying everyone around it. Like it destroys Fernanda. This whole thing. We didn't pull a slide on her specifically, but I find her one of the most fascinating characters in this story.
Yeah, remind me what her deal is.
So Fernanda is the one that was raised to be a queen. Like her family just like convinced her that she was royalty.
Right, and she had a gold chamber pot and everything.
Yeah. And so she's like gets into this relationship with this man, expects to be treated like that, and just never is, because he keeps this concubine for his entire life, and will go back and forth between them. He lives with Petrocotis for a while. He lives with Fernanda at the house for a while. He never really like appreciates either of them. Like even this relationship is based off of his use for it.
Right. Using the sex magic to make cows. Yeah.
To get totally rich.
But like, I mean, that's true. That's all very serious. But it was stuff like this in the book that I think provided a lot of the lightness and levity to it, because it's just silly.
It is.
It's just
very silly. Yeah.
There's just this idea that they open the door and the whole courtyard's covered with rabbits, and and it's just like it's having fun with the magical realism, which I think if it didn't do this, where yeah, it does have a point to it, but I think he's also just having fun with the images and the language of it, where you're just like tickled by the idea of the rabbits keeping them awake at night.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun. That's one thing that maybe, nobody's ever gonna tell you like this Nobel Prize-winning book was silly and funny, right? But like I think that it absolutely is. Like that's one of the beautiful things about it, is it captures a lot of different facets of the human condition, and one of those is this silliness and absurdity.
Yeah, this has me think of back in high school, when the first time in my life I was starting to read like the English class, literature class, and mandated classics, right? and in your like, I think in your head you hear Nobel Peace Prize. In your head you hear classic canon of literature, and you're like, this book's probably gonna be really boring. Like, I think that's something that all kids have. And the shock for me the first time I started reading this book, and I don't even remember what like the first classic book I read was. The shock for me was the realization that, oh no, wait, these books are actually like a lot of fun. Like they can be silly, they're goofy. And I think that's something that's very true of this book as well, is that, yeah, like just because it's like esteemed and well regarded and highbrow, quote unquote, does not mean that it can't be ridiculous and over the top and funny and enjoyable in that kind of way. And I think that's something that every person kind of has to realize for themselves as they go through the canon of classics.
Right. And I think that's the thing about literature, is it's capturing, especially like fine literature, if you will, it's capturing something that has never been captured before, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Like you've never had this image of a courtyard paved with rabbits in your head before. It's completely novel.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And those are just the ones that were born last night.
Yep. All right. Next slide. The Segundo twins' sister is named Remedios the Beauty, and she's weird.
A little bit.
Actually, Remedios the Beauty was not a creature of this world. Until she was well along in puberty, Santa Sofia de la Piedad had to bathe and dress her, and even when she could take care of herself, it was necessary to keep an eye on her, so that she would not paint little animals on the walls with a stick daubed in her own excrement. She reached 20 without knowing how to read or write, unable to use the silver at the table, wandering naked through the house, because her nature rejected all manner of convention. When the young commander of the guard declared his love for her, she rejected him simply because his frivolity startled her. How simple he is, she told Amaranta. He says that he's dying because of me, as if I were a bad case of colic. When indeed they found him dead beside her window, Remedios the Beauty confirmed her first impression. You see, she commented, he was a complete simpleton. It seemed as if some penetrating lucidity permitted her to see the reality of things beyond any formalism. That, at least, was the point of view Colonel Aureliano Buendia, for whom Remedios the Beauty was in no way mentally retarded, as was generally believed. But quite the opposite. It's as if she's come back from 20 years of war, he would say. Ursula, for her part, thanked God for having awarded the family with a creature of exceptional purity, but at the same time she was disturbed by her beauty, for it seemed a contradictory virtue to her, a diabolical trap at the center of her innocence. It was for that reason that she decided to keep her away from the world, to protect her from all earthly temptation, not knowing that Remedios the Beauty, even from the time when she was in her mother's womb, was safe from any contagion.
So the Remedioses in this book are all very strange, right?
Uh-huh.
We have the original Remedios, who is a child that Aureliano falls in love with. It never quite says her age, but she's prepubescent when he falls in love with her. So,
right. And everyone's very upset by this.
Yeah, everyone's like, weird.
But not upset enough, because they're like, all right, I guess.
You sure you don't want one of the other girls? Nope. The child, please.
Yeah.
Cool. And she dies in childbirth. And then we have Remedios the Beauty, who is different as well. Not all there. Incredibly beautiful, but like, I don't want to use crazy because it seems like too uncouth of a word, but like...
Like my take was, and this is not very supported by the text, it was more like, this just struck me, was like she's almost like literally an angel or an otherworldly being.
Not a creature of this world,
Yeah, where like it's more like she just doesn't see the point of any of the silliness that people get up to, and just sees them all for their overt buffoonery when they go about their ridiculous, like I mean, the idea of a man telling her like, oh, your beauty is torturing me, and then like dying, it's like, yeah, what an idiot.
Yeah, that's
like
stupid.
She's kind of reacting in just like a very like matter of fact way, and like calling it like it is, basically. But to a ridiculous magical realism extent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I like that. Like, she shaves her head at one point, like, 'cause she just doesn't like. She's one of the most beautiful people the world has ever seen, and she's entirely indifferent to that beauty. She has beautiful, wonderful hair. Nah, I'm just gonna shave all that off. I don't care about it. Yeah, and she literally floats away to heaven. That's the end of her story. And I mean, like, I think the safe from any contagion is supportive of your angel theory, right? That she is just literally an angel. It's almost to say, like, she can't, like, exist in this world. Like, she has to, it's like, she doesn't belong here. She's not supposed to be here. The world can't handle her. And so she just leaves. She just goes
Right.
bye-bye.
Is this actually a line, or am I making this up, that like she got tired of abiding by the convention of gravity or something like that?
Basically, something
Yeah.
like that, yeah.
Toby says she's fey around the edges. I like that.
Yeah, I like that. I really like what the Colonel sees here. Like, he doesn't see, he in her does not read like something's wrong with her in the way that they do. Like,
Right.
it's as if she'd come back from 20 years of war. He sees her as being like in like a PTSD type of shock state.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's interesting because I think you see with each one of these characters, they kind of read into her their own issues, right? Like, the Colonel reads into her the stuff that he's suffering through. Ursula looks at her and is like, oh, thank God, a beautiful child in the family. And then she's immediately terrified of that beauty for what it could mean and represent. And so instead of showing her to the world, she attempts to lock her away from it.
Yeah.
And I like how we see each of the, like, not each of the characters, we see different characters react to her in different ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's Remedios. I feel like I could have just pulled a slide for each character. And I kind of did that because this is the next one's yours, I think, right? Wait, did I mess it up?
It's fine. I can do 2 in a row.
All right, do 2 in a row.
Okay. The aging Ursula has gone completely blind, but it has allowed her to see things she never saw before. One afternoon, when Amaranta was embroidering on the porch with the begonias, Ursula bumped into her. For heaven's sake, Amaranta protested, watch where you're going. It's your fault, Ursula said. You're not sitting where you're supposed to. She was sure of it, but that day she began to realize something that no one had noticed, and it was with the passage of the year, the sun imperceptibly changed position, and those who sat on the porch had to change their position little by little without being aware of it. From then on, Ursula had only to remember the date in order to know exactly where Amaranta was sitting. Even though the trembling of her hands was more and more noticeable, and the weight of her feet was too much for her, her small figure was never seen in so many places at the same time. She was almost as diligent as when she had the whole weight of the house on her shoulders. Nevertheless, in the impenetrable solitude of decrepitude, she had such clairvoyance as she examined the most insignificant happenings in the family that for the first time she saw clearly the truths that her busy life in former times had prevented her from seeing.
So in the blindness, she sees.
Yes.
We just talk about impenetrable solitude of decrepitude.
Yeah.
It's poetry. I love it. I love it so much.
Yeah.
I like, once again, we have to go back to this general concept of solitude and what solitude is and what it allows you to see and what it allows you to realize and the truth of it all. This is basically like, this is about change, right? Like, the sun's position causes you to change their position little by little without being aware of it, but the sun is going to be in that same position next year, right? So
yeah,
while you will change little by little without being aware of it, you will always return to that original state you were at, and therefore you're entirely predictable. And it's like, it's definitely it's stating that, which is something the book states implicitly at the end, that free will, that none of that matters. It's all set in stone. You're going to behave the exact way you're going to behave, and you won't even notice it.
Yeah, Brendan in the chat is saying something along these lines that like basically no one ever figures out that she's blind because she's so able to she knows everyone and what they should be doing right now and where everything is based on the fact that it just happens over and over, that she doesn't need to see.
Yeah. It's like everything is so predictable and so routine and so unchanging that sight doesn't matter.
It's redundant. Yeah.
I love that. I love that so much. All right, moving right along, let's talk about a character we haven't focused on for a bit. Let's talk about Amaranta. Or Amaranta? You read the audio.
Amaranta, I think, but
my niece is named Amara, so I'm just going to call her Amaranta. Yeah.
It's almost impossible for me to do the correct pronunciations for some reason, but yeah.
Death did not tell her when she was going to die, or whether her hour was assigned before that of Rebecca, but ordered her to begin sewing her own shroud on the next 6th of April. She was authorized to make it as complicated and as fine as she wanted, but just as honestly executed as Rebecca's. And she was told that she would die without pain, fear, or bitterness at dusk on the day that she finished it. Trying to waste the most time possible, Amaranta ordered some rough flax and spun the thread herself. She did it so carefully that the work alone took 4 years. Then she started sewing. As she got closer to the unavoidable end, she began to understand that only a miracle would allow her to prolong the work past Rebecca's death. But the very concentration gave her the calmness that she needed to accept the idea of frustration. It was then that she understood the vicious circle of Colonel Ariano Buendia's little gold fishes. The world was reduced to the surface of her skin, and her inner self was safe from all bitterness. It pained her not to have had that revelation many years before, when it had still been possible to purify memories and reconstruct the universe under a new light, and evoke without trembling Pietro Crespi's smell of lavender at dusk, and rescue Rebecca from her slough of misery. Not out of hatred or out of love, but because the measureless understanding of solitude. I think this is one of the most beautiful parts of the book to me. And again, it's we're repeating. I kind of pulled these slides intentionally to repeat these beats again, because that's what the book is doing. This idea of, once again, in the last moments of your life, to realize the truth of the futility of the way you were living it.
Yeah, right.
That's too late.
That absolutely does happen to so many of the characters, that they live their lives repeating others' mistakes, and then realize that they've wasted their lives when they're past the point of doing anything about it.
Yep.
And this so again, I do get the characters confused. So this Amaranta and Rebecca like hate each other, right?
Correct. Yeah, they're the ones that were both in love with Pietro Crespi, and basically she let that hate like fuel her. Like she blames herself for the original Remedios' death because she willed Rebecca to die so hardly that like someone else died, and she's like, oh shit, that's my fault, I put that into the world. But the interesting thing is, like, Rebecca ends up marrying Jose Arcadio, right? And then Pietro goes to Amaranta and is like, I love you, like let's get, and she like completely spurns him. She does this over and over again. Like, these people that she wants like offer themselves to her, and she spurns them, and eventually they give up or die or go somewhere else, and then she's devastated, and she just continues to do this.
Is this something that several of the women characters do? Because I feel like that happened more than once, where like there would be a couple that like it was obvious that they were going to be together, and then the man would declare his love, and then the woman would shut herself up in a room for the rest of her life in response, and then he would end up with a sibling or something. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but like it seemed like there was a theme of like not reality intervening to keep people apart, but the person themselves being like denying themselves the love that they actually wanted for no real reason.
Yeah, I mean, I know Amaranta does it like twice, so you might be thinking of that. I'm trying to think of which other, like,
might have just been her twice. Yeah.
I know Mimi like denies the guy at first, but then like most of the reason why she's shut up and in a room that he's sneaking into through the tiles is because of her mom.
Right.
Not wanting it. But I'm pretty sure Remedios the Beauty, this happens to her as well, because doesn't that guy like fall through the ceiling when he's trying to see her naked? Yeah.
And then he gets shot, right? Or stung by scorpions or something.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely right. This is a recurring thing that happens.
I definitely like this moment of the conversation is the one where I'm like, wait a minute, am I mixing up like 3 different things? But yeah, no, I mean, I think it's a theme. I think basically one of the themes of the book is people sabotaging their own happiness, and this is one of the ways they do it.
Yeah, agree. All right.
Next slide. The massacre of the banana plantation workers. Get down. The people in front had already done so, swept down by the wave of bullets. The survivors, instead of getting down, tried to go back to the small square, and the panic became a dragon's tail as one compact wave ran against another, which was moving in the opposite direction, toward the other dragon's tail in a street across the way, where the machine guns were also firing without cease. They were penned in, swirling about in a gigantic whirlwind that little by little was being reduced to its epicenter as the edges were being systematically cut off all around like an onion being peeled by the insatiable and methodical shears of the machine guns. The child saw a woman kneeling with her arms in the shape of a cross in an open space, mysteriously free of the stampede. Jose Arcadio Segundo put him up there at the moment he fell with his face bathed in blood, before the colossal troop wiped out the empty space, the kneeling woman, the light of the high, drought-stricken sky, and the whorish world where Ursula Iguaran had sold so many little candy animals. When Jose Arcadio Segundo came to, he was lying face up in the darkness. He realized that he was riding on an endless and silent train, and that his head was caked with dry blood, and that all his bones ached. He felt an intolerable desire for sleep. Prepared to sleep for many hours, safe from the terror and the horror, he made himself comfortable on the side that pained him less, and only then did he discover that he was lying against dead people. There was no free space in the car, except for an aisle in the middle. Several hours must have passed since the massacre, because the corpses had the same temperature as plaster in autumn, and the same consistency of petrified foam that it had, and those who had put them in the car had time to pile them up in the same way in which they transported bunches of bananas. Oof.
Yeah. So this is the most directly allegorical moment in the book. This massacre is based off of a real massacre that happened in Colombia in the 1920s. And as Brendan says in chat, which is fun, if you eat bananas regularly, there's a pretty solid chance that some of them are from the same company that caused the massacre the scene is based on. Sweet.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Once again, fun fact has never been used non-sarcastically.
Yeah. But I mean, I think this is the one moment in the book that I think Marquez makes his most direct point, right? This company moves into Macondo, they take over, they segment themselves, like their whole section, the American section of the town is lined with barbed wire that's electrocuted. The people like want nothing to do with any of these people, and then of course the workers start to want rights, just things like food, and like I think they mentioned that, which is something that also very much happened, is that they're paid in like tokens that can only be exchanged at like the company store, right. So it's not even real money, and they start demanding changes to that and are totally massacred, and then it's completely like painted over. Like by the end of the story, the only person that believes it is one of his descendants, and everyone else calls him crazy.
Yeah, right. He's in fact pretty much the only one who survives it and has any recollection of it, and everyone. So like at first, it's obvious that the story is being silenced, because people know that it happened, but they don't want to talk about it. And then almost immediately, it just didn't happen as far as they're concerned.
Yeah. And this is the beginning of the 4 years of rain, the 5 years of rain almost, that basically completely wipe out the town. Like almost, I think they say that Mr. Brown, the American that came and started this town, called the rain to wipe out the town. And so basically said, we'll give you the things you want as soon as it stops raining. And then by the time it stops raining, not only is the entire plantation just completely destroyed, but the town is as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, not subtle, but I think this is the one moment where Marquez was like, I don't want to be subtle here. I don't want to play with this. This is something that happened, and this is exactly how it was covered up. And poor Jose Arcadio, who like was mentioned before, was probably an Ariano, was destroyed by war and fighting for the things they believed in, and he's basically like non-functional the rest of this book. He just sits up in a room and like reads over the prophecies and speaks again and again about how 3,000 men died.
Yeah, everyone there. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, like I wish I'd completely straightened out my sources before this talk, but like one of the things that I was reading basically insinuated that Gabriel Garcia Marquez witnessed this massacre as a child, or believed he did, or remembered witnessing it. I'm not sure if that could possibly be true. It's weird because I can't, like, I'm searching right now and I can't find any substantiation for that, but
Mm-hmm.
that was in one of the things that I read in preparation, which would be quite a thing to witness, obviously.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Well, and I think I, I can't remember who it was. But one of the other characters, their uncle or father brought them to an execution, and that like changed his life forever. It might have
yeah,
been Arcadio, which explains why he went nuts. But
yeah, yeah. I think you're right. Yeah. But yeah, so I think this is one of the moments where like it's almost kind of the same magical realism tone, right? Like,
yeah,
but it's not at the same time, because it's like the people are forming a vortex of bodies as they're running around and getting mowed down, but it's like that's just a very mellifluous way of describing a horrifying event. Like, he's using this almost beautiful language of a gigantic whirlwind or an onion that was being peeled, but it's a mass of people that's being mowed down by machine guns.
yeah.
And and at the end, this comparison of like the texture of the dead bodies and the fact that they've been piled up like bunches of bananas. It's horribly macabre and terrible, and he's using this. I don't know what else to call it other than like the magical realism language, the magical realism tone that he has kind of lulled you into.
Yeah, I mean, like this is a horrifying event, and um, like the language is still beautiful. I
Yeah,
agree.
yeah, right. Just it's yeah, it's interesting how he's done this. This is one of those things that makes me think like, yeah, I mean the sleight of hand of the whole magical realism trope is so that he can throw stuff like this at you and have it kind of get to you in a way that it wouldn't if you knew that this was just like a literal description of a massacre.
Right, and this is what moves me into like masterpiece territory with this
Uh-huh.
book, because like there's a lot of crazy shit happens in this book, a lot of seemingly nonsense stuff, but it all feels to me controlled. You know, like there is a hand guiding us through all this stuff the entire time, and that's the way the book feels to me. Like, so as we maneuver and move through what is a whole lot of deep stuff and a whole lot of crazy stuff, and in the same book where banging your mistress makes rabbits make more rabbits, we have like this terrible scene, and
Yeah.
I don't know, it's just like it's so deftly handled, I think.
Yeah.
And like a writer who has like absolute confidence in what they're doing.
I agree. Yeah. All of the weirdness seems to land and affect you the way that it means to affect you, even if you don't know what it means.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and I love this comment of Brendan's. The magic. So the scenes that are based on reality are given the same amount of wonder as the literal magic is, and vice versa. It normalizes the magic and fantasizes the mundane. I love that.
Yeah, that's
I
a
think
really good way of
that's
putting it. Yeah.
that's exactly right. Yeah. Cool
All right.
or
Next up.
terrible.
Yeah, terrible. Absolutely terrible. And cool. I'm going to go eat a banana after this
Right.
and feel just awesome about it. So now we got to talk about Jose Arcadio, who is the sixth generation in the book now. He is the son of Aureliano Segundo and Fernanda. He was going to be the next pope, so he's sent off to Rome to go to seminary school and learn to be I guess a cardinal one day, and then bishop, pope. But of course, that was all bullshit, Matt.
Right.
As soon as he got to Rome, he unenrolled from seminary and has just been living there. And he doesn't. He waits until both his parents are dead to return to Macondo. While he's there, he finds he's hanging out with a bunch of small children, which is uncomfortable. I wasn't quite sure how old he was supposed to be, but he's hanging out with kids. Like, they call them children, and it doesn't seem like I don't know. What's your read on that?
I for some reason thought that he was relatively young, not a child. I I don't know. It didn't bother me that particular element, which maybe
Yeah.
I just wasn't paying enough attention to that. Um,
Yeah. Okay.
and I saw the children as being more like adolescent children.
Yeah, I don't think like little. Yeah, I mean they
Okay.
drown him in a pool, so I don't think they're like four
Yeah,
year olds.
right. They
Yeah.
murder him. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah. So that's basically what happens in this slide. So ever since he had expelled the children from the house, Jose Arcadio was really waiting for news of an ocean liner that would leave for Naples before Christmas. He had told Aureliano and had even made plans to set him up in a business that would bring him a living, because the baskets of food had stopped coming since Fernanda's burial. But that last dream would not be fulfilled either. One September morning, after having coffee in the kitchen with Aureliano, Jose Arcadio was finishing his daily bath when, through the openings in the tiles, the four children he had expelled from the house burst in. Without giving him time to defend himself, they jumped into the pool fully clothed, grabbed him by the hair, and held his head underwater until the bubbling of his death throes ceased on the surface and his silent and pale dolphin body slipped down to the bottom of the fragrant water. Then they took out the 3 sacks of gold from the hiding place, which was known only to them and their victim. It was such a rapid, methodical, and brutal action that it was like a military operation. Aureliano, shut up in his room, was not aware of anything. That afternoon, having missed him in the kitchen, he looked for Jose Arcadio all over the house and found him floating on the perfumed mirror of the pool, enormous and bloated, and still thinking about Amaranta. Only then did he understand how much he had begun to love him. So once again, a Jose Arcadio is brutally murdered in a militaristic type fashion, which happens to like every single one of the Jose Arcadios,
Right.
except for the first one.
Yep. And the Aureliano who was shut up in his room working on inscrutable scriptures or whatever,
Yeah.
is bereft. Yeah, I wasn't. This is the children murdering him. I was like, surely that's a metaphor for something. Like I don't know. I couldn't figure out the children. I remember that distinctly being like, I'm gonna pay attention to what's going on with these children, and maybe it'll become clear to me. And it never did at all. So
One of the things that I liked about this, and kind of the way I wanted to take this, is these sacks of gold exist throughout the story, right?
right,
We first find there's just a statue that's filled with these gold coins that nobody knows who left it or why it's here. Ursula takes it and says, nope, we're going to bury this in case the owner ever returns. There's a whole prophecy around when the owner is going to return to claim the coins, but that never happens. They find the coins glowing.
right.
That's how they discover them, because they're glowing. So that's how they find them, and then they spend them recklessly, and then they lead to his downfall. I don't know, man. That's why I wanted to bring it up, because I wanted to hear your take on this, because I was like, what's going on with these coins?
Yeah. I mean, okay, this is completely out of my ass, but like, what if they're like oil? Suddenly Latin America finds wealth in the form of natural resources, that had been buried the whole time, but untapped, or like maybe they knew it was there, but there was only tapped at some point in time, and then the
Mm-hmm.
people who, like, I don't know, I'm reminded. I mean, and this is obviously not right because this is a more recent reference, but I'm reminded of like, um, oil companies, drilling the wells and then Venezuela nationalizing them, and that basically destroying confidence in Venezuela and destroying its economy, or not that single-handedly, but like that kind of thing. So like, it's sort of a very Latin America thing where to have like a sudden bounty of natural resources, and then that actually somehow ruins everything and results in famine and murder and death, and the person who found the natural resources being killed and having it stolen from them and so forth.
Yeah, I kind of like that, because like we never, like, there's no owner, right? Like, if they were just it was just there one day, and we don't know who
Yeah.
put it there or why it's there. The family is like wants to spend it, but the matriarch of the family says no, it doesn't belong to us. They're going to come back for it one day, and so we can't have spent it. And then the first person that does spend it is horribly punished for it. So
Yeah. I'm going to go with my natural resources interpretation until someone tells me otherwise.
it's great. I like it. Could be drugs, David says.
Could be.
Yeah. All right, now we have to talk about her, Matt. The mysterious hidden woman that's been in this book the whole time, but I totally forgot about multiple
Okay.
times throughout the book.
Santa Sofia de la Piedad. Santa Sofia de la Piedad never seemed bothered by that lowly position. On the contrary, one had the impression that she liked to stay in the corners without a pause, without a complaint, keeping clean and in order the immense house that she had lived in ever since adolescence, and that, despite during the time of the Banana Company, was more like a barracks than a home. Sorry, especially, whatever.
I don't know how you got the spite out of that.
Yeah, especially during the time of the Banana Company was more like a barracks than a home. But when Ursula died, the superhuman diligence of Santa Sofia de la Piedad, her tremendous capacity for work, began to fall apart. It was not only that she was old and exhausted, but overnight the house had plunged into a crisis of senility. A soft moss grew up the walls. When there was no longer a bare spot in the courtyard, the weeds broke through the cement of the porch, breaking it like glass, and out of the cracks grew the same yellow flowers that Ursula had found in the glass of Melchiades' false teeth a century before. With neither the time nor the resources to halt the challenge of nature, Santa Sofia de la Piedad spent the day in the bedrooms, driving out the lizards who would return at night. One morning, she saw that the red ants had left the undermined foundations, crossed the garden, climbed up the railing where the begonias had taken on an earthen color, and had penetrated into the heart of the house.
Yeah, so she's this fascinating character who just kind of, as the text even says, hangs out in the corners and has been one of the things keeping the house together. And at the death of Ursula, she just kind of like it becomes a losing battle. And this is, I mean, at this point in the story, like the rains have ceased, but the house is falling apart. Everything's kind of returning to nature. Everything's reducing back to the way it was before. They've been fighting this battle against the wild and are officially losing it. And this section ends with Santa Sofia just basically being like, I'm out. I can't do this anymore. And she just walks off and we never see her again.
Okay, where did she come from? What is her... Is she in the family?
She was married to Arcadio, I believe, who was the one who was murdered. Executed, I think, for being a warlord.
Okay. Yeah, she was one where I kind of just forgot who she was. And in fact, I think I was like, was she one of the Native American servants who came with them originally?
Mm-mm.
No, she's not. Yeah. But I was very confused about her.
I think the book kind of is designed for you to forget who she is. I think like she literally like she'll just pop up in random spots where it'd be like, oh yeah, and then she's
still here.
She made some food, and you're like, who did what?
Yeah.
She just, I mean, she stakes no claim on the house. She just is quietly there doing the work.
And then it gets to be too much.
Yeah. I love the red ants had left their undermined foundations, crossed the garden, climbed at the railing, and taken on and had penetrated into the heart of the house. Heart of the house.
So these symbols, I feel like 3 or 4 of these slides have mentioned the begonias.
They have, yes.
Which is funny because I don't remember noticing the begonias when I was reading it, but now it's very clear that the begonias are important.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, the fact that they're like basically dying here, they're taking on an earthen color, is meaningful. Like they maybe symbolize. I mean, this is obviously a simple interpretation, but something like the life and the liveliness of the house.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've got the red ants, which are obviously another symbol of decay and the threat of doom that is under their feet at all times.
Yep. I love the cement of the porch is breaking like glass. Like the weeds are poking through it. It's cracking like glass. I love that. The house had plunged into a crisis of senility. Like we talked about the house being a character, and it really is. It lives and it breathes. It has good periods and bad periods. It grows and it shrinks. It changes, but it returns. And just like in the cyclical nature of everything else, now the house is being reduced back from whence it came.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like Ursula, where she ages in reverse and turns into an elderly baby, basically.
Exactly. Yeah. All right, let's get to some good old fashioned Game of Thrones-esque ant incest.
All right.
This is mine. Yeah. On Sunday at 6 p.m, Amaranta Ursula felt the pangs of childbirth. The smiling mistress of the little girls who went to bed because of hunger had to get her onto the dining room table. straddled her stomach, and mistreated her with wild gallops until her cries were drowned out by the bellows of a formidable male child. Through her tears, Amaranta Ursula could see that he was one of those great Buendias, strong and willful like the Jose Arcadios, with the open and clairvoyant eyes of the Aurelianos, and disposed to begin the race again from the beginning and cleanse it of its pernicious vices and solitary calling. For he was the only one in a century who had been engendered with love. He's a real cannibal, she said. We'll name him Rodrigo. No, her husband countered. We'll name him Aureliano, and he'll win 32 wars. After cutting the umbilical cord, the midwife began to use a cloth to take off the blue grease that covered his body as Aureliano held up the lamp. Only when they turned him on his stomach did they see that he had something more than other men, and they leaned over to examine him. It was the tail of a pig. So... I mean, like, so this is the culmination of everything we saw from the beginning, right? And I love this idea that, like, he's going to have the best aspects of the Jose Arcadios, the best aspects of the Aurelianos, but he is going to be the one that is going to break the cycle, cleanse their pernicious vices and solitary calling, for he was the only one in a century who had been engendered with love, who was created out of love, and he's got a pigtail.
Yep, he's doomed. He's got the curse. I mean, and I don't even know what to make of it entirely, right? Because like it's obviously saying that, like, yep, this was prophesied. We knew that if there was any incest in this family line, then it would result in the pigtail. Mm-hmm. But then at the same time, they're saying that he's like this super baby with all of the positive qualities. And you know, it's interesting because the text is how to phrase it. The text simply says, through her tears, Amaranta Ursula could see that he was one of those great Buendias, etc. You know, this and as if she's perceiving this accurately, and it's not just her bias, right?
Yeah, see, I read it completely as her bias. I read it as she looks upon this child and sees everything she wanted. She wants to name him Rodrigo. Like, there's this moment where Amaranta Ursula comes home and she brings life back into the house. She comes with her husband and she breathes life back into the house, and things seem like they might be going well and everything's going to be good. And she says, when I'm going to have 2 children and I'm going to name them anything but Jose Arcadio, anything but Aureliano. I'm going to be different. Things are going to be different. And then she falls in love with her nephew, and here's the cycle again.
Yeah.
I love that. We'll name him Rodrigo. I am going to, this is going to break the cycle. And no, we'll name him Aureliano, and he'll win 32 wars, which we know Colonel Aureliano Buendia did not win 32 wars. Right. He lost every single one of those wars.
Right.
And this is, I mean, this is devastating. Like, this is, I think everything here, everything she says is her desire, her wants, her dreams, her hopes, and then the name and the tale is the reality. Is nope. This is how it's gonna work. This is how it's gonna happen. And of course, then she dies. She dies in childbirth.
She dies almost. Yeah, she dies. It's like the saddest death in the book too.
Yeah.
I feel like she is one of the only characters who I liked unreservedly, and like I was kind of rooting for her.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh no, and then yeah, it's just there's this terrible foreboding surrounding the whole thing, especially when you see the pigtail, because like for a second you have the hope that she has, like you're like, they've broken out of the cycle, and it's like no, you can't, it's impossible.
Yep. Which leads us to the final revelation of the end of the book. Take it away.
All right. He was so absorbed that he did not feel the second surge of wind either, as its cyclonic strength tore the doors and windows off their hinges, pulled off the roof of the east wing, and uprooted the foundations. Only then did he discover that Amaranta Ursula was not his sister but his aunt, and that Sir Francis Drake had attacked Riohacha only so that they could seek each other through the most intricate labyrinths of blood, until they would engender the mythological animal that was to bring the line to an end. Macondo was already a fearful whirlwind of dust and rubble, being spun about by the wrath of the biblical hurricane, when Aureliano skipped 11 pages so as not to waste time with facts he knew only too well, and he began to decipher the instant that he was living, deciphering it as he lived it, prophesying himself in the act of deciphering the last page of the parchments, as if he were looking into a speaking mirror. Then he skipped again to anticipate the predictions and ascertained the date and circumstances of his death. Before reaching the final line, however, he had already understood that he would never leave that room, that for it was foreseen that the city of mirrors, or mirages, would be wiped out by the wind and exiled from the memory of men at the precise moment when Aureliano Babylonia would finish deciphering the parchments, and that everything written on them was unrepeatable since time immemorial and forevermore, because races condemned to 100 years of solitude did not have a second opportunity on Earth.
So this is like the most depressing ending of a story ever.
Yeah.
Races condemned to 100 years of solitude did not have a second opportunity on Earth. This is it. This is all you got. And this is what happened. The lion is dead. Macondo is wiped off the face of the planet. It's over. It's dead. And here's the thing that confuses me, Matt. And we talked about this right before we started recording. He wins the Nobel Prize for this speech, or for this book, and he gives at the Nobel ceremony like one of the most like optimistic, like hopeful speeches in the world. Like he finishes the speech with this line, where races condemned to 100 years of solitude will have, at last and forever, a second opportunity on Earth, which is seemingly a direct contradiction to the lines he finished in his book, right? And I just find that fascinating. Like I don't know, maybe if he changed his mind, or that was specific to the way this book looks at it, and it is not like the specific way he believed. But I don't know. I had a really hard time, grokking that.
Yeah, it would seem kind of disingenuous if this book ended with them breaking the cycle. I don't know. Just like based on the way it is, everything is about momentum and not being able to escape. And it's not even like they're not trying to escape. It's just like, no, you're trapped by fate and by your nature.
Mm-hmm.
And to say like, oh no, all you had to do was actually have incest. That would be that would be weird. And I would, and if he did that, I would be like, okay, what are you saying with that then? But I don't know. I mean, I think giving a speech like that, it's sort of pointless and mean to be like, and yeah, we're all doomed.
Right. No, I get that. I get you can't walk up there and be like, hey, my book was about how we're screwed. I get that, but I just found that fascinating.
What is I literally, I didn't understand it the first time, and I don't understand it now. What is this reference to Sir Francis Drake attacking Riohacha? Like I'm.
So remember in the beginning where it said the place that they were trying to get to, Ursula blamed Sir Francis Drake's attack of Riohacha on her getting together with Jose Arcadio Buendia.
Okay.
So basically what it's saying is that the only reason Sir Francis Drake attacked Riohacha is so this moment could happen. So okay. Amaranta Ursula and Aureliano could find each other, could fall in love, and so everything could be destroyed.
I see. Okay.
So that was the instigating moment that led through 7 generations to this moment of destruction and death.
Okay, so it's fate basically. It's just talking about fate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. In chat, Brendan and Toby are talking about the city of mirrors. We didn't pull a slide, but yeah, at the beginning of the book, Jose Arcadio Buendia sees Macondo as this giant, beautiful city of mirrors. The first time he looks at the ice, he sees in the ice the future of the town as this like successful, beautiful city of mirrors. And then here at the end, he throws in a parentheses, or mirages.
Right.
Like, so it's, as much as it is a reflection, this beautiful reflection of light, it's fake. It's not real.
It's hallucinations and tricks and no substance to it.
Yeah. I love that. It's a beautiful end to the book. I really love, as much as depressing as that last line is, I think it's just beautifully stated. Like,
yeah. I found it very upsetting personally when his lover and like genuine love of his life dies, and he's like freaking out, and then at some point realizes that he's lost track of the baby.
Yeah.
And then he's like, well, I'm sure someone took care of the baby, and then the next thing you know, you see that it's like being eaten by
Yeah,
ants,
it's taken away by the ants.
and
Yeah.
you're like, oh no, this is the saddest thing in the world.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. I it's tough. It's a tough ending, and like it's sad. I don't know, like that's what I mean by looking, like, obviously this guy in his heart of hearts believes that humanity is not hopeless, that the people of Latin America and the people of the human race at large are not completely without hope, that we persevere, we survive. It's in that Nobel,
Yeah,
I keep saying peace, I'm so used to saying Nobel Peace Prize.
right.
It's in the Nobel Prize of Literature speech that he claims that, like, despite famine, despite plague, despite war, despite genocide, the one thing human beings continue to do is live, is survive, is go on, is exist, and there is no stopping that. But this book seems to say that while that is true, that existence is predicated on repeating the same mistakes over and over again,
Uh-huh.
and I guess maybe that's what life is, a struggle inside a system that has already determined who you are, what you will be, and what will happen to you, right?
Yeah.
Which is not like, it's not to say that the struggle is not worth it. It's not to say that the life within that struggle is not worth living, but it is a struggle nonetheless.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that some of these characters actually don't end up living lives that weren't worth living, but most of them do kind of end up having fully miserable lives. I mean, I realize you weren't directly quoting his speech there, but I feel like it is a bit disingenuous to say, like, no matter what people live on, because I'm like, no matter what some people live on,
True.
and
True.
then the people who died tragically, or the children who died tragically, don't get to, and that's the problem. That's let's not pretend that everything is good because because we're not extinct yet, which we could very well become, by the way. Yeah, I don't know.
But
I
we're
don't quite buy
not,
that line.
baby.
Yeah.
Still got 7 billion strong.
All it
As
takes is one
as
meteor.
as long as there is one human left on the earth,
Everything is fine.
humanity was a success.
There's a second chance. So you're saying there's a chance.
Exactly. A 1 in 7 billion chance. So that is 100 Years of Solitude. A wonderful book. I love it.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna read it again because,
there,
like, yeah,
there are moments in your life where you read a book and you go, I'm never going to forget about this book.
yeah,
And this book for me. I will never forget. And yes, the details will become hazy to me over time, like everything is. But this is a book I will never forget experiencing. And I think that's a remarkable work in a world in which you and I read so many books, watch so many movies, watch so much television. We're constantly bombarded by entertainment and stories, and I love it. I'm doing it to myself. I'm not complaining about it. But in a world where we do that, for something to just automatically give me that feeling that it's going to stick with me, is remarkable, and that excites me so much.
yeah. And I think this conversation has helped me, as they almost always do, because I definitely was just kind of baffled and struggling with the book, and I was like, I'm gonna need to do that thing where we talk about it,
Mm-hmm.
and first of all, remind me of the beauty of it, and then also talk about what certain things meant, so that I begin to form a more solid picture of it. And
Yeah.
like most books are almost written to be like, downloaded into your brain in an effective and memorable fashion, so that you can just rattle off, like, yeah, these are the main characters, this is what happens, this is the order of events. Like, they're optimized for that almost. And this is not at all concerned with your ability to remember that. Like, it's not holding your hand. But like, having read it once now, I feel like I kind of have an infrastructure to go back and absorb it better, and find connections, which is really the fun thing.
Yeah.
I think find connections between things now that I'm primed to understand what the book is getting at.
I think you're right. I think this is one of those stories that a reread would be incredible.
Yeah.
And maybe I'll do that one day. I got so many books to read, though.
Yeah, not maybe not soon, but
Yeah.
That's the cool thing about audiobooks is it's always there, and it's pretty easy
Sure,
to
sure.
just do that. Yeah.
Have I told the book club about my 1,000 books to read before I die book that I bought?
I don't remember you mentioning it on this show.
Well, I have that. Check one, 999 to go. No, I've read more than that, but yeah, I think I was with you in Denver when I saw that book at a Barnes and Noble and was like, "Ooh, a list."
Yes, perfect. I think you were.
Yeah, all I have to do is read 100 books a year, just strictly on that list, and I'll be done in a decade.
Yeah, that's no sweat.
Yeah. Brendan says in chat that they're so glad we enjoyed it. It's easily their favorite book, and hearing us break it down has been excellent. Oh, good. I'm glad. There's always, especially when it's one of these patron produced episodes, I always have a little bit of nerves. I'm like, God, I hope we do this justice. I hope we have more to say than just, hey, this is a book about solitude.
Right. I feel like it's very generous of you to say that we broke it down.
Yeah,
we talked about some stuff, but yeah,
I think the book broke us down.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
No, we loved it, and yeah, thanks for like Toby says, thanks for bringing it to our attention, and yeah. I'm so glad that I read this.
This is our 22nd book for the book club, which is incredible. I can't believe we've been going almost 2 years on this book club. That's amazing. Yep. A lot of you guys are here with us every month, and that's awesome. I'm so happy that you guys keep joining us, and I'm continuing to love this idea. It's not the most popular thing we do. I wish it was more popular. I really do. But the books that I've gotten to read over the course of this 2 years, like some of them I might have never read. I definitely probably would have never picked up Satanic Verses. I won't say definitely. I probably might not have picked up this book. But yeah, I'm so happy I did.
Yeah, right. Again, it's like it's been on my like, oh yeah, that's an important book list since I was probably like 10 or something.
Yeah.
So yeah, really glad.
I will try to find the list. My version of the list of 1,000 books is a big book this big that has like summaries of each one. So I'll try to find the actual list for you. It's a mixture of fiction and nonfiction, so it's not all novels. But I will definitely share that list with you guys if I can find it. I'm gonna eventually I want to put it all into an Excel spreadsheet so I can like track it because I'm insane. But
that's a lot of typing.
It is. I looked for like a version, a CSV version, and it doesn't exist. So, anything else before we wrap it up? Well, let's as that stuff is coming in, let's talk about next month, Matt. Next month, July is going to be a crazy month for us because I'm gone for a week and a half, going to Hawaii. But it will not affect the book club, I don't think, because we're going to go back to the last Friday of the month. So technically, you get a whole extra week to read since we're a week early on this one, right?
Yeah.
So next month's book is Leviathan Wakes by James S.A. Corey. This is book number 1 in The Expanse. How many is 9? What is it?
Nonology.
Knowledge. There we go.
Yeah. James S. Corey is actually 2 people. I only learned this recently.
Yeah, we just did a Doofcast on the first season of The Expanse last week, so this is perfectly timed. This was a very close vote. I wasn't sure which way it was going to go, but I'm excited to read this book. I'm gonna be reading on the beaches of Hawaii. I'm gonna be reading about space.
And this is one of the few times where I have read the book club book before, but I will read it again and hopefully you have more to say about it.
I'm sure you will. So that meeting will be happening on Friday, July 26th at 9:30 p.m. We'll be making a whole post with this book and the time, and I'll have a link. We have an Amazon affiliate program where you can purchase the book through us if you want. So yeah, you can get the book and start reading, and we will be here that Friday to talk about it. And as always, if you want to reach out to us to feed us any questions or any things you would like us to focus on for the book club, you can do that. You can reach out to us via email at doofmedia@gmail.com or over on our Twitter at doofmedia.
Yeah. And if you like what we do here and you want to see more of it, head on over to our patreon.com/doofmedia, and consider donating $1 a month or whatever else you can afford. You'll get access to our private Discord server, as well as the ability to vote for which books that we cover on the book club and tons of other cool benefits. So go check that out.
Yep. Thank you guys, everyone, so much for hanging out with us. If you are listening via the audio podcast version of this, hopefully you guys can make it next month. We really think the live discussion really enhances what we're trying to do here. I think everyone that hangs out live with us says they enjoy it. They could be lying, but I think they do say they enjoy it. So special thanks to everyone who hung out with us tonight. Toby, David, Ted, Brendan, thanks again. Brendan says it is outside the wheelhouse of the Standard Book Club, but they appreciate everyone who read it. We appreciate you. We want books that are outside the standard wheelhouse. The wheelhouse is good. I love the wheelhouse, but sometimes I want to leave it.
The book club is a trick to get me to read things that I want to read but will never read. So this is a perfect pick, in my opinion.
Yeah, we got to go back to we've only done one horror book and one mystery book. I really want to go back to those wells, read some more of that stuff. But science fiction is good too. Leviathan's, I thought it was Leviathan's Wake. I swear to God, I thought that's what the name of the book was. And I wrote that down and I changed it very last minute. It said Leviathan's Wake right here on the thing.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense because it's an ocean creature.
Yeah. And also, maybe by the end of this book, I'll understand what the title means, because the first season of The Expanse sure didn't do that for me.
No comment.
All right, guys. Thanks again. And we will see you all next month. Oh, almost 2 hours on the dot. Good job, us.
Yeah.
David, I can't wait to have actually read the book next month. I can't wait either. Yeah, I didn't actually read this book. I just faked it.
Yeah.
How'd I do?
It's pretty good. Yeah. The Jose Arcadio character was really something.
All right. Well, normally afterwards we hang out for a little bit, but we're recording Ward tomorrow.
And so we're recording Doofcast the next day.
Yeah, it's a crazy week for us. So we're just gonna take off.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us, though. I hope you guys. I mean, we really do enjoy it when we get to interact with y'all. I think it really improves the show, and it's a more fun discussion. And
yeah.
I felt like this time especially, you guys in the chat were like providing me with spins on things that I could be like, oh yeah, that's a smart thing to say. I'm going to say that.
Yeah. We really appreciate that. I was hoping for that, because this is a tough book, and sometimes I need to rely on y'all to make me sound smart, which is always good.
Oh yeah, and because you're the special limited group, I can mention I'm going to be writing a fan fiction, 40,000 Years of Solitude. It's a Warhammer 40K 100 Years of Solitude crossover. Just look forward to that.
Matt told me the basic premise of it, and it was the most amazing thing I've ever heard of. I want it. I want it right now. All right, guys. Hang out tomorrow. We'll be back here tomorrow at 8:30 Central Time to talk about the latest chapters of Ward. So maybe we'll see you then. If you're a patron. Oh yeah, I shouldn't say that if you're not. $1 a month. Goodbye.
Bye.